back in the same corner of the room, it would stay consistent. The lamp's still in the same spot, the couch is still in the same spot, right? And just trying to give the characters a tangible world to interact.
Keeping track, I imagine, of all that, and that the lamp doesn't move, or if the character does move, say the lamp, then you know where it's going to
right.
go to.
There is a little bit of fudging involved, especially with Cerebus, because he has the gray tone on him. It's a zipatone, and it's well, in Canada it's called letricet or letritone. And because of the gray dot tone, nothing works better behind him than solid black or solid white, because you need a certain amount of contrast for that gray to come out. He's got the white highlights on him, which helps sometimes. So, but you'll notice, like I've just thrown a shadow in behind his head here, like supposedly from another bottle, but just to offset that gray tone, because if I had a crosshatched bottle next to his head, it would just sort of blend together, it wouldn't stand out. Same with the word balloons. I try to have them stand out with too much distraction around them. So it's sort of a balance between what you would actually see and what actually works. So there is a little bit of play there. Again, like, you know, throw a white towel behind his head so that he stands out more.
And for those of you who like more Cerebus readers, or of course there's the original pages here now, and then they get reduced with is it like a full third that gets reduced?
I believe it's a 60% reduction, and then and then printed on newsprint. So you do tend to lose a lot of the really fine detail, which was always a problem for me. The thing is that this is it's an illustration board, so it's a what they call a hot press finish paper. It's nice and smooth. It takes the ink really well. And my tendency was, ever since I started drawing, is I start getting closer and closer and closer to the page as I'm inking, especially. And I remember when I was a kid, my mother would sneak up behind me, grab me by the back of my head, and lift me back up. Of course, I never learned, though. I kept getting closer and closer and closer to the page.
Yeah, and so that's how you got all this.
That's where all the fine detail and the cross-hatching, but then at the same time, every once in a while, you have to sit back and see how the whole page is developing too. And actually, it helps if you can sort of unfocus your eyes, and which gives you sort of an indication of how it's going to look on newsprint. But
very good. And I imagine that reduction also makes that much more important to make sure there's a contrast
right.
Between, because if it looks blurry to have a crosshatch behind the letter set, then it's going to be just a blob.
Right, it's just going to be a gray blob. Right.
Well, I've sort of worked our way down to some of these. If you've been through the exhibition before, you see these great sort of stained glass windows depictions. And the character Rick now, as part of his sort of drunkenness or insanity or thinking that he's a prophet, as Dave put last night, is actually thinking of himself, this is what he's really like, and then this is his sort of mental image as a stained glass window. So maybe, and I know that we talked before, you had a friend who actually made stained glass windows.
Yeah.
At this point, was there any influence, like looking at how a stained glass window is actually made, or was it more looking at the history of stained glass windows?
Well, it was a combination, because Dave, of course, had the research material with the stained glass windows. But it's one thing to look at one and try to discern how they actually put that together. But my friend Scott Idle does stained glass as a hobby, and I've actually helped him design a few pieces, and he did one that was actually based on a drawing from the book as well. And to see how they're actually physically put together was because there's a tendency. This one tends to look more illustrative, I think, whereas this one over here has a real sense of weight to it. The different size of leading and the actual where the leading goes, because it seems very random sometimes when you look at it, right? But there is a rhyme and reason to it, and it definitely helped to see how a glass was actually physically put together and how it physically hangs together.
Yeah. And then you sort of see that there's different eras almost of that stained glass window, the technology of stained glass windows.
Right.
And
it's more primitive, definitely. And stuff like this too, with the squashing the perspective like that, before they had actually figured out the 2 and 3 point perspective. And that's not easy for me to do, because I look at it and go, that's wrong. That's not how you draw perspective. But you have to look at the old windows and go, well, that's the way they did it back then. So, like they put a round top, the oval top on the barrel as if you're looking down at it, and then a flat bottom as if you were down on the floor, which is physically impossible, right? You can't be looking at the top of the barrel and be on the floor at the same time. And as I said, stuff like that drives me nuts. It's like, that's not right. But that's the way they did it. So.
And after years and years of, that's your thing, that's perspective.
Yeah, because,
Draw it out of perspective.
That's right. Like, no, my brain just doesn't work that way. Because actually, one of the first things I do when I get a page is find the horizon line, where the eye level is, where are we situated above. And it's usually, if Cerebus is the only one in the panel, we're usually at Cerebus's eye level, which is when he's standing direct, is 3 feet off the floor. Which, you see under a lot of tables that way. Right. Well, this one you say, at least he's standing on these boxes of wood, right, which gets him up over the bar. Otherwise, he wouldn't even clear the bar. Right? So actually, there's a bit of fudging with that too, because Cerebus tends to be a bit of an elastic character. When he's feeling very full of himself, he will actually draw him bigger than the 3 feet, right? And I will raise the horizon line accordingly, right? And when he's feeling like a big loser, he's back down to 3 feet off the floor, and so is the horizon line.
And is that something where you would just sort of, you could sense that because you worked so long with Dave on that, or you like,
no, a lot of that was pretty much instinctive, I think, or intuitive.
I know there's one over here that I wanted to talk about specifically because the other thing as we go around, we'll see not only is there some history of stained glass windows and stained glass windows being incorporated into the Cerebus book, then when we get over to some of the actual architecture, I suspect that there's actual real-world architectural elements. And I know last night Dave mentioned that this itself is apparently a real-world sort of architectural.
Right. Again, and a lot of it stems from the research material that Dave has come up with, because he does his part first. He sort of assembles a whole bunch of reference material, research material that he just sort of passes on to me. Then when it comes to my turn to do the.
And is it just a matter of you finding something that you want to draw or that you think fits within sort of the parameters?
It's a balance between that too. Yeah, between what I want to draw and what needs to be drawn.
Yeah.
Because as Dave said, with writing a 26-year project, you have to write what interests you. And I think to actually draw day in and day out, it definitely helps to draw what interests me.
Right. But there's also the world, this Astarcia on this continent has a very specific sort of feel for it. This is like a medieval, early Renaissance, like, I don't know what
that was very flexible too, because it all depends on what part of it you're in, and whether it's more of a high society, like an upper society, or whether we're the lower dregs and slums and whatnot. And then actually, as the book progressed too, we got further away from that medieval, because quite large spans of time had passed too, right? So we could update things a bit, modernize them a bit.
Which I think is a good segue, maybe sort of move around.
Segues are good.
Yeah. And move right next to this sort of later part of the storyline. Modern age. So there's, I guess again for the people who aren't Cerebus fans, so we have Rick and Cerebus, and they're in this box since such a big span of time had passed, but yet you still knew that it was going to be based on the bar. If there were specific churches or specific pictures that you saw that you're able to think, that would really plug in really well in this area, or if it was like, all right, I kind of know the elements of a Renaissance cathedral, now I have to like design one and Cerebus' role.
Right. Well, Dave gave me a big coffee table picture book of the Vatican and went like this. So it was basically adopt the architecture and decorations of the Vatican and turn it into the Three Wise Guys version of the Bard from Guy.
Oh, well, that sounds easy.
Yeah, no problem. And then do it over and over and over again. That was actually a problem, or anytime it's sort of a problem whenever a new location comes up. It's how long are we going to spend in this location? From how many angles am I going to have to draw this location? Right? So on one hand, you want the tendency is try to keep it simple, but how do you keep the Vatican simple? For one thing, right? So again, it's a balance, and the idea was that we were only going to use very limited camera angles on the sanctuary, mostly just straight-on shots. But invariably, I mean, it gets boring visually and to draw it, to do it from the same angle all the time. So sure enough, you're going to move things around. And so again, it always helpful to me to have a floor plan, and then by this time I was actually doing computer models as well. I built a few physical models earlier, and by this time I was using just some very basic 3D architect programs and some CAD, computer-aided design programs, so that I could actually take a very bare bones version of the room and twist it to the angle that I wanted. I could place a camera and go, this is what it looked like if you were lying on the floor in this corner and looking up at that corner.
You can sort of get the computer to do like a...
So I used to all do that all in my head. I used to do that, from the floor plan and have to extrapolate what it would look like from the opposite corner. So this at least sped things up a bit, and then I could print that out and use that as my sort of rough that would have taken me hours to do before. Now I have to set this as a starting point, and then we go into the tracing paper. Yeah. Actually, this is a good example here of this is the page, the way the page looks when I get it, and that's the page. These are actually this relates to and this is this one here. Yeah. Right. So this page here is the way that I would have gotten it from Dave, and that's the finished page there.
And these are good. I mean, they're good, especially to see what Dave does as the artist, and then, as I say, you look at this and think, that's a lot of white space.
Right. Well, these are actually great examples for me, but here again, that was, whew! It's just actually days like that, pages like that, give me the time to do pages like that, because it's still, the number one overriding concern was always that it was a monthly book, and we have to do 20 pages a month. And like you said, it was up every Wednesday for the 12 years you were reading it. And the only way you can do that is to budget your time and we treated it like a job, right? You get up, you go to work, you do the work. A lot of these, I would try to have, excuse me, my horizon lines, all my perspective worked out, and have a rough on tracing paper. The nice thing about working on tracing paper is you can lay it over. I could lay it over Dave's, what Dave has done, and I can just go nuts, right? Okay, let's say we put a letters line here, I can just start drawing lines and perspectives, and if it doesn't work, you take it off, throw it away, try it again, right? And Dave's, the page remains undisturbed. There's no erasing involved or accidentally, there's been accidents. Usually what I try to do is get to this rough stage. Well, this is a finished one, but at least know what I'm doing by lunchtime. Yeah. Right? And it usually involved a lot of just sitting and staring at a page and trying to figure out what needed to be done and where and how long it was going to take. And then go ahead and start working out perspectives, and then I can take a lunch break and then go back and start tight penciling and inking and try to get it done by 5 or 6 so you can go home. Right. And then come back the next day and do it again.
And of course, since you're your own boss, how often was there a temptation probably knock off that?
Oh well, yeah.
That's just probably going to come back to it.
Yeah, it's just bites in the ass a couple days later. Yeah, we're at the end of the month where all of a sudden now you're behind and the issue's not done yet, and it's the end of the month, and now you're working on the weekend, and now you're working at night, and so to avoid those situations, it was best just to try to work every single day. In those days when you didn't feel like it, or when it feels like you're drawing with your left foot, right? It's just get it done.
That's because I always heard over the years that I've been reading Cerebus, the mantra was sort of page a day, or I guess closer to the end, maybe a page and a half.
Page and a half. Page and a half would be a good thing to shoot for, and then be happy with the page. Okay.
So you were saying once you got to this point, the finish point, that might be like like half a day, and then the other half of the day would be the finishing up, or did it just kind of depend on the page?
It varies from page to page, but yeah, like I said, I usually try to have the penciling done because, this part would take about half the day, and then the other half would be finishing it up and inking it. Inking was for me, a very slow and painful process. I forget how you say it down here.
And these tracing paper sketches here are something that's really kind of a happy accident, because when I had first approached Dave and Gerhard about putting the show together, the only thing I really thought was let's get the pages in, and I thought at the time really that we could fill up this entire gallery with the pages that I wanted, and I could have, I think. And then when I drove to Kitchener and picked up the pages, to see this big portfolio that Gerhard has and all these tracing paper drawings, I was just like, wow, those are really big. And the stars must have been in my eyes or something, because Dave and Gerhard were like, yeah, borrow these if you have room for them in the exhibition. It's like, you have room for them in the exhibition, trust me. And it's been nice because you see people come in here, and the show's been open for a week now, and I've been able to watch people who don't know Cerebus, certainly not know Cerebus, come in and just look around. And it's like this era, coming back and like, everybody. Yeah. And then yesterday, I come down and Dave sees the exhibition for the first time, and even Dave Sim goes, wow. How did they do this? And it's amazing. And Margaret and I really were just going back and forth, like, there's so much detail, even just in the pencil drawing,
right?
That, like, did you try to get every line that you thought was going to be inked, or was it more like just a matter of, the tone for here, and then that could transfer over?
Yeah, it's like, not all these little cross-hatch lines aren't in the tracing paper. I don't know if maybe I should just explain the tracing paper. When Dave's page like this, I would cover it in a sheet of tracing paper, and then just with a felt tip marker, I would outline the characters anywhere else that there wasn't going to be a background. And then what you do is you flip the tracing paper over, and am I getting this right?
We're going to have an example of it over here.
Oh, if we going over here?
Outlining the
Oh, yeah. Oh, right, yeah. You can see the missing section where the character is here. There's no point in me drawing all this stuff in the middle here if it's covered up by a character. Same with this one. So then I flip the paper over and I work out all the perspective and where I want the shadows to be, where I want the solid blacks to be, and like you said, the tonal quality, where most of the cross hatching is going to be, and any surface texture. And once all that's done, you flip it back over again, you put it on the original page, and you line it back up with the characters, and then you go over everything and transfer it down onto the drawing book, onto the illustration board. And at this point, now I've drawn this twice now, right? Once on the back, flipped it over and traced it all over again. I've drawn this drawing twice, and I take the tracing paper off, and usually I go, I'm done with this. And it just goes, right? And that's why I was amazed too, seeing the tracing paper mounted like that with the mat board in the frame, because to me that's just an intermediate step to get to this. This is what's important. This is what gets shot with the camera and gets printed, right? And this is just a way of getting to there. And for years we just threw these away. This is just this job is done, And like I said, but this time I've drawn this drawing twice, and now I have to draw it a third time when I ink it. And my tendency was just to throw this away because I never wanted to see it again. So, but yeah, when they're mounted like that, they look way better than just scrunched up into a portfolio and covered in you get so messy because you've got graphite on both sides of the tracing paper now, and when you transfer it over, your hands are black, your fingers are black, and the pages, I think you can still see some fingerprints and stuff like that all around the edges and stuff.
And the curator knew was definitely like, God, these things by the whole cotton gloves. This is like
We're taking the infantile approach. Dirty.
But these two tables are interesting. Again, you see in some real good detail that step and this process.
Right.
And this was an interesting, again, a sort of happy accident that you guys are, oh, yeah, I'm interested in this, and it's like,
Right, because in this case, I don't know if the features are actually here.
that's just a part of the one.
Well, that's the tracing paper for that one, but there's another series of pages, which Dave will be able to send. Where the background repeats itself. It's a series of panels that and it sort of pans along here. So rather than redraw it every time, this is sort of
This is it here.
these two. And this is also a good example. You can see them. Sorry, what was that?
No, it's just this little flash.
Here's a good example. You can see how much this filled in. See, you can see even how it's lighter on this side, and how much darker it is on that. That's just the inconsistencies of printing, but you can see how much that all filled in. So rather than redraw this background 6 times, I just made one master background that I photocopied, and then I cut out where the character is and physically glued the photocopy onto the page. So that's what that is.
And did that work as smoothly as it sounds like it?
No. It always sounds like, the funny thing is, we'd always come up with these time-saving measures that always took twice as long as just doing it, but it would have been faster to redraw it 6 times.
Yeah. This is the one